Picture 4 lives. Robert is 68. He grinded through his career, snagged a lovely house in the suburbs back when Reagan was president, brought up his kids there, and from the outside everything looked dialed in. And to be fair, for most of his life it really was. Karen is 52. She's got 2 children, a respectable run in marketing, a decent set of wheels in the driveway, and an annual trip somewhere warm. Scroll her Instagram if she ever bothered with one, and you'd assume she's winning. Next up is Marcus, 38. Set aside the tired avocado toast punchlines. This man hustled, chipped away at his student debt month after month, watched mates buy properties that were laughably out of reach for him, and filled his Saturdays with bottomless brunch and short city breaks because, honestly, what was the savings account even for? Last we have Zoe, 24. She's running a TikTok, she's got a side gig, the obligatory Stanley Cup, and she's already 90 days deep into her investing era. She's the most money-savvy 24-year-old her family tree has ever produced. 4 people, 4 eras, 4 wildly different financial situations, and yet every last one of them stepped into the very same snare. Not a similar one, not a kind of related one. Identical. The same trap. Just dressed up in the fashion of whichever decade owned them, and by the time this video wraps up, you'll know which costume version you're walking around in today. So let me name what the trap actually is, but first, an important note. This isn't a story about being reckless with cash. The people who fall in are usually the careful ones. They make budgets, they pause before swiping. The trap is craftier than that. In every generation, there comes a moment where the surrounding world quietly draws a picture of what success is meant to look like. A specific style of house, a specific style of life, a specific bucket of experiences, and without ever being formally taught it, you soaked it in. Every one of us did. It came from the people you saw daily, the era you were shaped in, the things that earned applause and envy. And the second your bank account could finally bankroll that picture of success, you bought in. It seemed like the obvious next chapter. This isn't about being greedy or sloppy. You were just obeying the silent guidebook your generation slipped into your hand. A guidebook. Nobody challenged because the entire room around you was reading the same pages. And here's the cruel part. From the inside, it never registers as a mistake. It feels mature. It feels like you're moving forward. So let's walk through each generation and catch the exact moment the silent guidebook got handed over. Because spotting it in someone else's life is the fastest way to spot it in your own. Robert grew up in a household that always paid rent. His parents never owned. And in the years after the war, holding the deeds to your own home was the loudest possible announcement that you'd made it. It was security. It was prestige. It was the American dream stamped onto a white picket fence. So the moment Robert landed a steady paycheck and the bank waved through the largest mortgage they'd let him sign for, he grabbed it. Naturally, that was the playbook. That was the move everyone made. And in the 80s, the maths backed him up. Yes, interest rates were brutal, but inflation was running just as hot. Real estate kept climbing. That house was practically guaranteed to appreciate. And it did. Today, it's worth 4 times what he handed over. On paper, the man's loaded. But here's where the story turns. Robert is 68, and the bulk of his wealth is locked inside the walls he sleeps in. The pension he was banking on never fully materialized, courtesy of a corporate restructuring back in the 90s. He has a nest egg, sure, but not one big enough to bankroll a quarter-century of comfortable retirement. And cashing out the house would mean abandoning the street he's called home for 4 decades. The house wasn't the snare. The conviction that the house was the entire strategy, that's what caught him. Robert poured years into broadcasting the appearance of wealth. The property, the landscaping, the loft conversion, while quietly starving every other corner of his finances. The destination was genuine. The ground beneath it had cracks. Karen's trap was a softer one, and in some ways more dangerous, because it wasn't built on one big choice. It was built on 100 little ones, each perfectly defensible. Gen X came of age as households started running on 2 incomes. They studied their parents and decided, we're going to outdo this. We're going to pull in more. We're going to own more. And they did pull in more. That part went exactly to plan. But here's the catch. Every time Karen's salary jumped, and it jumped repeatedly, her life inflated to fill the space. Promoted at 32, traded up the car, crossed 6 figures at 38, bought the bigger place, kids hit secondary school, tacked on the international holiday. Each of those decisions, taken on its own, was completely reasonable. The money was there. She'd earned the privilege. This phenomenon has a name: lifestyle creep. It's the Boomer Snare, just swapped into a smart casual blazer. The issue isn't that Karen spent. The issue is her outgoings climbed in lockstep with her income. So even though she was bringing in numbers her parents never came close to, her savings rate barely budged. The gap between earnings and expenses stayed roughly the same, just scaled up to bigger digits. By 52, Karen reads as financially successful. And in fairness, she partly is. She has equity. She has property. But retirement is only a decade out, and the spreadsheet is tighter than it should. Be for someone who's been pulling a strong salary for 2 decades. For Gen X, the success signal was lifestyle. Nice possessions, nice memories, a life that photographed well. And boy, did they deliver that signal, reliably, on the first of every month, by direct debit. Now let's talk about Marcus. And listen, if you're a millennial right now, hear me out before anything else. The system genuinely turned its back on your generation in ways you didn't sign up for. The 2008 crash gutted the early careers of a whole age group exactly when they should have been laying the groundwork. That's a fact. It matters. But here's the snare millennials walked straight into. And given the hand they were dealt, you can absolutely see why. When the traditional markers of having made it, the property, the pension, the meaningful equity, were all priced beyond your reach, you redirected your spending toward what you could actually afford. And for millennials, that translated to experiences, flights, tasting menus, festivals, streaming subscriptions, anything that took the friction out of life. And the culture cheered it on. Buy moments, not stuff. You can't pack a bank balance into a coffin. Live a little. Every lifestyle brand, every viral essay, every captioned beach photo reassured millennials that this was the wiser way to handle money, that older generations were the deluded ones, and that what really compounded over time was memory. Marcus burned through his late 20s and his early 30s collecting moments, genuinely beautiful ones. But at 38, his portfolio is thin. There's no deed in his name. There's a low hum of dread about what comes next, which he silences by clicking confirm on the next flight booking. The snare wasn't the experiences themselves. The snare was treating experiences as a stand-in for building actual wealth, and having an entire cultural movement frame that swap as enlightenment. For millennials, the success signal mutated into the well-lived life, the full passport, the good story. And it was sold to them so persuasively that most never clocked that it was still just a costume. New fabric, same function. Which brings us to Zoe. And Zoe is fascinating, because Gen Z is the most financially clued-in generation that's ever existed. They were raised on personal finance content. They could explain an index fund at 19. Compound interest comes up at brunch. So surely they outran the trap completely, right? Not exactly. Gen Z's version of the snare is the most visible one ever invented, because it plays out in public. Their success signal isn't a deed, a lifestyle, or a stamped-up passport. It's an aesthetic. It's the outfit, the desk setup, the apartment that frames perfectly on camera, the labels that whisper, I have taste, I have funds, I've made it. Broadcast to a few thousand strangers. And the cruel kicker? Gen Z is doing all of this while genuinely investing on the side. Zoe has a stocks and shares ISA. She drops 50 quid in monthly. She's pleased with herself for it. And she should be. That's a real foundation. But she's also dropping $200 a month on items, whose main job is to look good in her feed. The Gen Z snare isn't a lack of knowledge. It's theater. They've memorized the vocabulary, but at times they're using it to perform wealth rather than accumulate it. Posting about portfolios while the actual figures stay tiny. Preaching financial freedom while the spending whispers something else entirely. Zoe isn't a lost cause. Far from it. She's 24, and she's already further along than Marcus was at her age. But the snare is right there, open, waiting, and it's the exact same snare we've been dissecting, now wearing a ring light and a thoughtfully styled backdrop. So, 4 lives, 4 decades, 1 snare. So what does breaking out of it look like? Because some people genuinely manage it. Every generation has a quiet group who clocked the trap and walked around it. And when you study what they did, the answer is almost identical every time. They split the signal from the substance. They made a deliberate call to look less wealthy than they actually were, so the real wealth could grow without drag. They postponed the costume. They drove the older banger, stayed put in the smaller place, passed on a couple of trips, ignored the aesthetic upgrade, and they funneled the gap into something that quietly compounded. It's not complicated, but it grates against every social wire we have, which explains why even sharp, financially fluent people still fall in. For Robert, escape would have meant, sure, keep the house, but also throw serious money at the pension. Don't bet everything on one asset. For Karen, take one lifestyle bump per pay rise, not all of them. Bank the rest. Let income climb faster than the lifestyle around it. For Marcus, one knockout trip per year, not four. Send the leftover into an index fund automatically. Every month, no thinking required. For Zoe, and she's still got time on her side, the move is to make the investing the thing she shares online, not the aesthetic. Grow the real number faster than the appearance of the number. If you want one principle to take away, it's this. Assets first, lifestyle second, always. Not for the rest of your life. Just until the assets are pulling enough weight that the lifestyle pays for itself. That's the playbook every generation's quiet winners eventually figured out. Robert, Karen, Marcus, Zoe, none of them are reckless. None of them are dim. They each followed the script their era handed them about what arrival should look like. And they put looking arrived ahead of actually being arrived. So here's the question I want to hand off to you, and I want you to genuinely sit with it. Which flavor of the snare has you right now? Is it the house holding the entirety of your net worth? The lifestyle that swelled with every promotion? The experiences that masqueraded as living while quietly displacing building? The aesthetic that performs wealth without ever quite producing it? Drop it in the comments. Not so anyone can pile on, genuinely, because the very first step out of any snare is being able to say its name out loud. And if any of this landed a little too cleanly, send it to someone in your life who needs the same nudge. They'll probably already know which generation they belong to.